The woman in the cream silk blouse sat down across from Zara without asking, placed an envelope on the table, and said 5 words that changed everything. I need you immediately.
$6,000.
Zara's fork froze halfway to her mouth, a perfect twist of pasta, suspended in the air. She blinked at the elegant Korean woman who'd just invaded her table at Jerry's diner, like she owned the place. The woman was striking in that effortless way money could buy, silver hair swept into a soft chignon, pearl earrings catching the fluorescent lights, an outfit that probably cost more than Zara's rent. I'm sorry, what? $6,000, the woman repeated, pushing the envelope closer.
Cash. Right now.
All you have to do is pretend to be my son's wife for 1 afternoon. 3 hours maximum. Zara set down her fork carefully, her brain trying to catch up. This was insane. This was definitely some kind of scam. But the envelope was thick, and $6,000 was 3 months of rent. It was her brother Malik's SAT prep course. It was her sister Maya's art supplies. It was the difference between drowning and breathing. Why? Zara managed. The woman's smile was warm but desperate. My name is Sun-hee Choi. My son is in the hospital. He's been in a coma for 3 months, and the doctors say he's dying. But I refuse to let him die alone, believing he never found love. Zara's practical side started screaming. Her impulsive side, the one buried under 2 years of raising her teenage siblings alone, whispered something entirely different. You want me to lie to a dying man? I want you to give him peace. Mrs. Choi's voice cracked slightly. My son wrote in his journal about wanting someone genuine. Someone who could love him for who he was, not what he represented. I saw you sitting here, savoring your meal like it mattered, thanking the busboy by name, and I knew you were exactly right. You don't even know me. I know enough. You're beautiful, but not flashy. Kind, but not weak. And you need the money badly enough to still be sitting here listening to a stranger's crazy proposition. Mrs. Choi leaned forward. One afternoon, you hold his hand, tell him he was loved, and let a mother give her son peace. That's all I'm asking. Zara thought about the eviction notice hidden in her drawer, about working 3 jobs and still choosing between electricity and groceries, about her mother's voice before she died. Take care of them, baby. Do whatever you have to do. One afternoon, Zara heard herself say, 3 hours maximum. Then, I never see you again. Mrs. Choi's smile was radiant.
Deal.
She stood, linking her arm through Zara's like they were old friends.
Come.
We don't have much time. 20 minutes later, Zara stood outside a private room in the most expensive wing of the city hospital, her heart hammering. Mrs. Choi had briefed her in the car. Her son Min-jae was 29, shot 3 times in what she delicately called a business dispute, loved art and music, hated seafood. They'd supposedly met at a cultural festival, bonded over being outsiders, married in secret. Remember, Mrs. Choi said softly, he can probably hear you even if he can't respond.
Talk to him.
Touch him. Make it real. She opened the door, and Zara's breath caught. The man in the hospital bed was devastating even in unconsciousness. Strong features, sharp jawline, dark hair against white pillows. A scar crept up his neck, and the edge of a tattoo, a tiger, maybe, peeked from beneath the hospital gown. His hands, resting above the blankets, were scarred across the knuckles. These were hands that had hurt people, but they looked gentle now, vulnerable in a way that made Zara's chest ache. Talk to him, Mrs. Choi whispered, then disappeared, leaving Zara alone with a beautiful stranger who was supposed to die believing she loved him. Zara approached slowly, sat in the chair beside his bed. The machines beeped their steady rhythm. She looked at his hand, calloused and strong, and after a moment's hesitation, placed hers over it. Hi, she whispered, feeling ridiculous and heartbroken all at once.
I'm Zara.
I'm supposed to be your wife, which is crazy, because I don't even know you. But your mom loves you so much, and she couldn't bear the thought of you dying alone. So here I am, pretending to be the person who loved you most in the world. Nothing. Just the machines. She kept talking anyway, about nothing and everything, her voice soft in the quiet room. And then she felt it.
A twitch.
So slight, she thought she'd imagined it. His fingers moved against hers. Zara gasped. The heart monitor spiked. His eyes began moving rapidly beneath closed lids, and then, so quiet she almost didn't hear it, he spoke. Stay. The room exploded into chaos. Doctors rushed in. Nurses adjusted machines. Mrs. Choi appeared with tears streaming down her face. Through it all, Min Jae's hand kept reaching, searching. Every time they tried to stabilize him, his vitals spiked dangerously, until Zara, acting on instinct, grabbed his hand again. Immediately, everything calmed. The head doctor stared at the monitors in disbelief. What just happened? She's his wife, Mrs. Choi said firmly, moving to stand beside Zara with an expression that dared anyone to contradict her. Min Jae didn't wake all at once. It took 3 days of gradual emergence, eyes opening unfocused, sounds registering, attempts at speech that came out garbled and frustrated. The doctors called it a miracle, a 1 in a million recovery. But there was a cost. He has severe retrograde amnesia, the doctor explained to Mrs. Choi and Zara. He doesn't remember the attack. He doesn't remember most of his adult life. And he's developed aphasia, difficulty with language. It may improve with therapy, but right now, he's imprinted on her. She nodded at Zara. Removing her from his presence causes severe psychological distress. His brain has latched onto her as his only anchor to reality. Zara felt ice spread through her stomach. What does that mean? It means for the foreseeable future, he needs you here. Removing you could cause a catastrophic setback. Mrs. Choi turned to Zara, with desperation replacing her usual composure. $15,000 per week. Stay until he's stable. Until he remembers his life. Please. Zara thought of her siblings. Of bills piling up. Of the fact that she was 3 days into this lie, and watching this beautiful broken man cling to her hand like she was his lifeline. 2 weeks, she said. I'll give you 2 weeks maximum. They both knew it was a lie. Zara moved into the Choi estate 3 days later, when Min Jae was released from the hospital. The mansion was exactly what she expected. Massive, elegant, intimidating. Guards everywhere. Expensive art on every wall. The weight of old money and older secrets pressing down on everything. The family dynamics became immediately clear. Mrs. Choi ran everything in her husband's absence. He was in federal prison, Zara learned quickly, for racketeering. Min Jae's younger brother Taehyun was 25, beautiful, and watched Zara like a scientist studying a fascinating specimen. And then there was Uncle Kong, Mrs. Choi's brother-in-law, who looked at Zara like something unpleasant he'd scraped off his shoe. But none of that mattered when she was with Min Jae. He was nothing like she expected. She'd imagined a monster, a mafia enforcer, brutal and cold. Instead, she found a man struggling to understand his own existence, learning to speak again by repeating her words like a child discovering language for the first time. He couldn't remember who he was, but somehow, inexplicably, when he looked at Zara, his whole body relaxed. When she held his hand, the nightmares, violence he couldn't remember but his body couldn't forget, would ease. Zara, he'd whisper, testing her name on his tongue. That's right.
I'm Zara.
My wife. And she'd swallow the guilt, squeeze his hand, and nod.
Yes.
Your wife. He'd smile then, this devastating genuine smile that made her heart crack wide open and say, Lucky me. The days blurred together. Min Jae improved rapidly. He could walk, though he tired easily. He could speak in simple sentences. He followed Zara around the estate like a shadow, panicking if she left his sight. She taught him about her world because he had no memory of his own. showed him photos of Malik and Maya, played him Motown and Afrobeats, told him stories about her neighborhood where community meant everything. He taught her things too, even without remembering learning them himself. Korean words that came instinctively: sarung for love, gajok for family. He filled sketchbooks with charcoal drawings of her face, obsessively capturing every angle. He played piano from muscle memory, creating songs he said were for her even though he couldn't remember ever learning music. When he had panic attacks, she'd braid his hair, and he'd quiet under her touch. When she had bad days, stressed about bills or her siblings, he'd hold her and say simple, honest things like, "You're safe," and "I'm here." That somehow meant everything. And God help her, Zara was falling in love with him. 3 weeks in, reality shattered. Taehyun found her in the garden, his usual cold composure cracked. "We need to talk. Now." In his office, he closed the door and faced her directly. "How long did you think you could keep this up?" Zara's stomach dropped. "I don't know what."
Please.
"I've known from day one. My mother hired you to play my brother's wife for his final hours. Except he didn't die, and now we're all trapped in this lie." He moved to the window. "But it's working. Min Jae is getting better. He's happy. So I've said nothing." "Then why tell me now?" "Because his fiancée arrives tomorrow." The world tilted.
What? Yon Haedfid.
Daughter of another powerful Korean family. My father arranged their marriage before he went to prison, a union to combine our organizations. The wedding was supposed to happen last year, but Min Jae kept delaying. Then he was shot. Taehyun's expression was unreadable. She's been in Korea, waiting. Now she's coming to claim what's hers. Does Mrs. Choi know? My mother orchestrated the delay. She never wanted the marriage. She hoped Min Jae would die before the wedding date. His voice was flat. You were supposed to be a placeholder for a dying man. Nobody expected him to recover. What happens when she gets here? Taehyun looked at her with something almost like pity. That depends on whether you're just here for the money, or if somewhere along the way, this became real for you too. Yoon Hae-jin arrived the next day in a black town car, stepping out in a white designer suit that screamed old money and older power. She was stunning, perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect everything. When she walked into the main hall where Mrs. Choi waited, her voice was cold and imperious. "Where is Min Jae?" "Recovering. He's suffered severe memory loss." "Then we'll postpone the wedding until he's well." "There's a complication. He believes he's already married." Silence crashed through the hall. Zara, watching from the staircase, saw Hae-jin's face twist with rage. "Then correct him. We can't. His psychological state is too fragile." "I don't care." Hae-jin's voice dropped to something dangerous. "I have a contract signed by his father. This marriage is happening. You have 1 month to fix this, or I'm calling my father and we'll handle it the traditional way." She left in a cloud of fury and expensive perfume. Mrs. Choi stood alone in the hall, and when she looked up and saw Zara on the stairs, her expression was devastated. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Zara found Min Jae in his art studio, painting. He looked up when she entered, smiled that smile that destroyed her every time. "I was painting you. Wanna see?" The canvas was her face in abstract colors, beautiful and loving and wrong because it was all based on a lie. Zara crossed to him, and he immediately pulled her close, resting his head on her shoulder like she was home. "You okay?" he asked, his speech much clearer now. "You feel sad." "I'm fine," she lied, and hated herself for it. Over the next week, Zara watched Hae-jin circle like a shark. She'd appear at family dinners, making pointed comments about tradition and duty. She'd corner Mrs. Choi with reminders about contracts and consequences. And through it all, Min Jae seemed oblivious, focused only on Zara, on getting better, on learning to be human again. But his memories were starting to return. Fragments at first. Flashes of violence. His father's angry face. The weight of a gun in his hand. He'd wake screaming from nightmares and cling to Zara, terrified and confused. Did I hurt people? He'd ask. She never knew how to answer. So she'd hold him and say, "You're not that person anymore." But she was starting to wonder who he really was. And more terrifyingly, who he'd become when he remembered everything. One night, unable to sleep, Zara wandered the mansion. She was passing Uncle Kang's office when she heard voices, Mrs. Choi and Kong arguing in Korean. Zara didn't speak much Korean, but she caught certain words. Money. Yoon family.
Threat.
She pressed closer to the door. The girl has to go, Kong was saying in English now. She's making Min-jae soft.
Weak.
When his memory returns fully, he needs to be ready to take his place. Not playing house with some American nobody. She's helping him heal. She's making him forget who he is. The Yoon marriage secures our position. The girl threatens everything. My son loves her. Your son doesn't even know her. He loves a fantasy. When reality returns, she'll be the first thing he discards. The words hit Zara like a physical blow. She backed away from the door, heart hammering, and nearly ran straight into Taehyun. Listening at doors? He asked quietly. I didn't mean. Come with me. He led her to his office, closed the door. How much of that did you hear? Enough. Zara's voice shook. Kong wants me gone. He thinks I'm making Min-jae weak. He's right about one thing. You're changing him. But not in the way Kong thinks. Taehyun pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. This is Min-jae 3 years ago. The man in the photo looked like Min-jae but harder. Cold eyes. Cruel smile. Standing over someone Zara couldn't see, gun in hand, face devoid of emotion. That's who Kong wants back. The enforcer. The killer. My father's perfect weapon. Taehyun's voice was quiet. But the man you've been living with these past weeks? The one who paints and plays piano and panics when you leave the room? That's who Min-jae actually is underneath all the violence he was raised to perform. What are you saying? I'm saying you gave my brother permission to be himself. And Kong is terrified of that because a Min-jae who chooses kindness over violence is a Min-jae who might refuse to take over the family business. Taehyun met her eyes. So, the question is, are you going to run when things get complicated, or are you going to fight for him? I don't even know if what we have is real. Then ask yourself this. Does it feel real when he holds you? When he looks at you like you're his entire world? When he chooses to be gentle because you make him feel safe enough to be soft? Zara's throat tightened.
Yes.
It feels real. Then fight for it. Because I promise you, Kong and Haejin and everyone else who wants the old Min-jae back, they're going to fight dirty. The next morning, Zara woke to find Min-jae's side of the bed empty. She found him in his room, staring at photographs, him with his father, him with men who looked dangerous, him holding weapons with the casual comfort of long practice. I remembered something, he said without looking at her. His voice was different, harder. I remembered what I did, who I was. Min-jae. I killed people, Zara. He turned to face her, and his eyes were full of horror. I remember their faces. I remember not caring. I remember my father teaching me that mercy was weakness, that love was a liability, that the only thing that mattered was power. She crossed to him, took his hands even when he tried to pull away. That was who you were forced to be. It's not who you are now. How do you know? What if when all my memories come back, I become that person again? What if his voice broke. What if I hurt you? You won't. You can't know that. Yes, I can.
Because I've watched you, Min-jae.
I've seen you choose kindness every single day. You apologize to me when you wake me with nightmares. You learn new words just to tell me you're grateful. You paint my face like I'm something precious. Her voice shook. That's not programming. That's not amnesia. That's you. The real you. What if you're wrong? Then I'm wrong. But I'd rather bet on the man who's becoming than the man you're afraid you were. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. And for a long moment, they just stood there, two people trying to believe that love could be stronger than legacy. But outside the room, forces were already moving. Uncle Kong had made his decision. If Min-jae wouldn't become who he needed to be on his own, Kong would force the issue. That night, everything changed. Zara received a text from an unknown number. A photo of Malik and Maya leaving school, both of them circled in red. Below it, a message. He marries Hae-jin and takes his place, or they disappear. You have 1 week. Her vision went white. She was still staring at her phone when Min-jae found her, took one look at her face, and took the phone from her shaking hands. She watched his expression shift from confusion to understanding to something cold and deadly that reminded her of the man in Taehyun's photograph. Who are they? His voice was dangerously quiet. My brother and sister. The people I'm responsible for. The reason I took this job in the first place. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed immediately by hurt. You're here for money. I was. I'm not anymore. But the damage was done. She saw it in his face, the wall going up, the coldness sliding into place. Pack your things. I'm having you driven home tonight. You'll be compensated for your time, and security will watch your siblings until this is resolved. Min-jae, don't. This isn't negotiable. His voice was flat. I won't put you at risk. Either of you. So you're just going to marry Hae-jin? Give up everything we. There is no we. The words exploded out of him. There never was. You were paid to pretend, and I was too brain damaged to realize it wasn't real. But it's over now. Go home. Forget about me. Forget all of this. He walked out before she could respond, leaving her standing in the massive bedroom they'd shared, her heart shattering into pieces she didn't know how to put back together. But Zara Bennett hadn't survived 2 years raising teenagers alone by giving up when things got hard. And she certainly wasn't going to let the man she loved sacrifice himself without a fight. She found Taehyun in his office an hour later. I need your help. With what? Stopping a wedding and saving your brother from himself. Taehyun studied her for a long moment, then smiled slowly. I was hoping you'd say that. But you should know, if we do this, we're going to war with some very dangerous people. I know. Zara's voice was steady. But he's worth it. Then let's get to work. What Zara didn't know was that she wasn't the only one making plans. Mrs. Choi, watching her son retreat into the cold shell of the man he'd been trained to be, had already set her own scheme in motion. Uncle Kong, thinking he'd won, had made a crucial mistake. He'd underestimated what a mother would do to save her son's soul. And Min-jae, alone in his father's old study, staring at the family ring he was supposed to give Hae-jin, was making a decision that would change everything. The wedding was set for 1 week away, and nobody was prepared for what was about to happen. Over the next 5 days, Zara worked in secret. Taehyun had given her access to old family files, financial records, anything that might give them leverage. She'd always been good with patterns, with finding connections others missed. It's what made her good at event planning. Now she used those same skills to unravel Uncle Kang's carefully constructed facade. And slowly, a picture emerged. The money wasn't moving the way it should. The Yoon family should have been receiving payments for the marriage alliance. Instead, they were sending money to Kong. Large amounts. Regularly. Dating back years. He's being blackmailed, Taehyun said, looking at the records Zara had compiled. Or he's embezzling, Zara finished. And the Yoons discovered it. They're using it as leverage. They dug deeper. Found more irregularities. Money disappearing from family accounts. Payments to shell companies. And then, buried in encrypted emails Taehyun's tech friend had decoded the truth. Uncle Kong had arranged the hit on Min-jae. Not to kill him, to incapacitate him just enough that Kong could take control of operations. The Yoon family had provided the shooters in exchange for a bigger cut of the Choi business once the marriage went through. It was elegant and ruthless and exactly the kind of plan that belonged in the world Min Jae's father had built. We need to show this to Min Jae, Zara said.
No.
Taehyun's voice was firm. Not yet. He's not stable enough. He's barely holding himself together, and if he finds out Kong tried to kill him, he'll do something reckless. Then when? At the wedding. Maximum witnesses. Maximum impact. We expose Kong in front of everyone, both families, all the associates. Make it impossible for him to deny or retaliate quietly. That's risky. Everything about this is risky.
Taehyun smiled grimly.
But you want to save my brother? This is how we do it. The day before the wedding, Zara finally saw Min Jae. He'd been avoiding her, staying in the west wing of the mansion, conducting business she wasn't privy to. But she cornered him in the garden as the sun was setting. We need to talk. There's nothing to say. He didn't look at her. Really? Because I have about 1,000 things to say. Starting with, you're an idiot if you think marrying Hae-jin will protect me. That got his attention. He turned, and she saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the pain he was trying to hide. It's the only way to keep you and your family safe. It's the coward's way. Her voice was sharp. You're so scared of becoming your father that you're doing exactly what he would do, making decisions for everyone else without asking what they want. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need your protection. I need you to trust me, to trust us. She stepped closer. You think you're saving me by pushing me away? You're destroying us both. There is no us. There never was. Liar. The word cracked like a whip. Look at me and tell me what we have isn't real.
Tell me you don't love me.
Tell me every moment we've shared was just you being confused because of the amnesia. He looked at her, and she saw everything in his eyes, love and fear and desperate hope. But when he spoke, his voice was cold. It wasn't real. You were an employee, a very good actress. But that's all. Zara felt like she'd been slapped. But she held her ground.
Fine.
If that's what you need to believe to get through tomorrow, fine. But I know the truth, Min Jae. And so do you. She walked away before the tears could fall, before he could see how much those words had destroyed her. Behind her, Min Jae stood in the garden, hands clenched into fists, every muscle screaming at him to go after her. But he didn't, because loving her meant keeping her safe, even if it meant breaking both their hearts. What he didn't know was that Zara had no intention of letting him go through with this. Tomorrow, at the wedding, she was going to blow everything wide open. And if the truth meant losing him forever, at least he'd be free to choose his own life. The wedding day dawned bright and beautiful, which felt like a cosmic insult. The Choi estate had been transformed. White flowers everywhere, hundreds of guests in designer clothes, an atmosphere of wealth and power and tradition that made Zara's stomach turn. She wasn't supposed to be there. Min Jae had made that very clear. But Taehyun had smuggled her in through the staff entrance, hidden her in a small room off the main hall where she waited, dressed in a simple black dress, clutching the folder of evidence that would either save Min Jae or destroy him. Through a crack in the door, she could see the ceremony space. Min Jae stood at the altar in a traditional black hanbok, his face carefully blank. Hae-jin waited at the back in white, beautiful and cold. The guests murmured appreciatively. Everything was perfect. Everything was a lie. The ceremony began. The officiant spoke in Korean about duty and family and tradition. Min Jae's face remained impassive, but Zara saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched at his sides. This was killing him. She couldn't wait any longer. Zara stepped out of her hiding place and walked down the aisle. Every head turned. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Hae-jin's face twisted with fury. Mrs. Choi stood, shock written across her features. And Min Jae, Min-jae looked at her with such desperate hope it nearly broke her resolve. Stop, Zara said, her voice carrying through the silent hall. This wedding is a lie. And I can prove it. Uncle Kong stood from his seat. Remove her immediately. But Taehyun was already there, blocking the guards. Let her speak. This is none of her concern. She's family, Taehyun said calmly, which gives her every right to be here. Zara pulled out her folder, her hands shaking but her voice steady. My name is Zara Bennett. 6 weeks ago, Mrs. Choi paid me to pretend to be Min-jae's wife while he was dying.
But he didn't die.
He recovered. And while living in this house, I discovered something interesting. She walked toward Uncle Kong, pulled out the first document. These are financial records showing massive transfers of money from the Yoon family to you personally, Uncle Kong. Not to the family business.
To you.
Dating back 3 years. Kang's face went pale. That's fabricated. Is it? She pulled out more papers. Because I also have emails between you and Yoon family members discussing the arrangement. How they'd help you embezzle from the Choi organization in exchange for access, once the marriage went through. The crowd erupted in whispers. Haejin looked between her uncle and Kong, confusion and fury warring on her face. And here's the best part. Zara's voice was cold now. I have proof that you, Uncle Kong, arranged the hit on Min-jae. Not to kill him, that would be too obvious. But to incapacitate him just enough that you could take control while he recovered. She pulled out the final document, an encrypted email decoded and printed. You paid the shooters through a shell company. The Yoon family provided them. You tried to murder your own nephew for money and power. Silence fell like a hammer. Every eye turned to Kong. His face had gone from pale to red, rage and fear battling for dominance. She's lying, he shouted. This is all fabricated by a gold digger trying to what? Zara interrupted. I was paid to leave. Multiple times. I stayed because I love him. She turned to look at Min-jae, and her voice softened. I stayed because somewhere between pretending and real, I fell in love with a man who's so much better than anyone ever gave him credit for. She turned back to the crowd. Uncle Kong wanted the old Min-jae back. The enforcer. The killer. The man who'd run this organization the way his father did, through fear and violence. But that's not who Min-jae is. Not anymore. Maybe not ever. Underneath all the training and expectations. Haejin stepped forward, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Is this true? She was looking at her father, at the Yoon family patriarch. Did you know about this? The old man's face was carefully neutral. We knew Kong was embezzling. We used it as leverage for favorable business terms. We did not know about the assassination attempt. So, you used information about theft to manipulate this family? Haejin's voice was ice. You dishonored our family name for money? Daughter.
No.
Haejin turned to Mrs. Choi. I knew nothing of this. My family's honor may be tarnished, but I will not be party to attempted murder and embezzlement. She looked at Min-jae. This arrangement is void. I want no part of this disgrace. She walked out, her family scrambling to follow, leaving chaos in her wake. Uncle Kong tried to run. Taehyun's men stopped him at the door. Mrs. Choi approached him slowly, and for the first time, Zara saw the steel beneath the elegant exterior. You tried to kill my son, she said quietly. You betrayed this family. You nearly destroyed everything we've built. I was trying to save it. You were trying to steal it. Her voice was final. Guards, take him. We'll let the authorities handle this. As Kong was led away, protesting and threatening, the guests began to disperse. Some looked scandalized, others intrigued. All of them recognized they'd just witnessed the Choi family's power structure completely shift. And through it all, Min-jae stood frozen at the altar, staring at Zara. When the room finally cleared, just family left, just the people who mattered, he spoke. You stayed. Of course I stayed.
Why?
I told you it wasn't real. I pushed you away. Because you're an idiot when you're trying to be noble. Zara crossed to him. And because I know the difference between what you say when you're scared and what you mean when you're honest. I was trying to protect you. I know. But I don't need protection, Min-jae. I need a partner. Someone who trusts me enough to face danger together instead of facing it alone to keep me safe. He reached out, touched her face like he was afraid she'd disappear. I love you. I've loved you since I woke up and heard your voice. Maybe even before that, in the coma, when some part of me recognized you as home. I love you too. The real you. Not the man you were trained to be. Not the fantasy from the amnesia. You, complicated and broken and trying so hard to be better than your legacy. I don't know how to do this. How to be someone worth loving. Yes, you do.
She took his hands.
You've been doing it for 6 weeks. You choose kindness. You choose gentleness. You choose me. That's all it takes. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, desperate and grateful and real. When they broke apart, Mrs. Choi was crying, Tae-hyun was grinning, and everything felt like it might actually be okay. So, Min-jae said, resting his forehead against hers. No more secrets? No more secrets. No more pretending? Just us. Honest and real and figuring it out together. I can work with that. He smiled, that genuine smile she loved. Though I should warn you, my family is intense. I noticed, and complicated. Also noticed. And my mother will probably try to plan our actual wedding within the week. Zara laughed. I'm counting on it. Mrs. Choi appeared beside them, still dabbing at her eyes. Speaking of which, you'll need a ring. A real one this time.
Ma.
I'm thinking something simple. Elegant. Maybe sapphires? They'd look lovely with her skin tone. Ma, we literally just stopped one wedding. Which is why we should start planning the right one immediately. Isabella's eyes sparkled with familiar mischief. Unless you have a better idea? Min-jae looked at Zara, raised an eyebrow. She bit back a laugh and nodded. He pulled something from his pocket. A ring made of wire and paper, delicate and beautiful and completely worthless. I made this last night, in case I lost you forever. I wanted you to have something that proved what we had was real for me, even when I was pretending it wasn't. Zara's eyes filled with tears. Min-jae. Zara Bennett, will you marry me?
For real this time.
No money, no schemes, no family obligations. Just you and me choosing each other. That ring is not appropriate, Mrs. Choi started, but Tae-hyun shushed her. Zara took the wire ring, turned it in her fingers. It was perfect.
Yes.
Absolutely yes. He slipped it onto her finger, and she didn't care that it would fall apart in a week. It meant more than any diamond ever could. They stood together in the hall that had almost witnessed the wrong wedding, surrounded by family who loved them despite being absolutely chaotic, and Zara felt something settle in her chest. This was home. Not a place, but this man, this family, this love they'd built from lies and desperation and choosing each other again and again. Though, she said, looking at the wire ring, we should probably get a real one at some point. We will, Min-jae promised. But this one matters more. Why? Because I made it with my own hands. Because it's worthless to everyone but us. Because it proves that what we have isn't about money or power or family obligation. He kissed her softly. It's just us choosing each other. And that's worth more than anything. 3 months later, they had a real wedding. Small, intimate, just family and close friends at a vineyard outside the city. Zara wore a simple ivory dress. Min-jae wore a dark suit with no tie. Mrs. Choi cried through the entire ceremony. Tae-hyun served as best man and only made 3 jokes about the fake marriage that started it all. Malik and Maya were there, finally meeting the man their sister had been talking about for months. Malik sized Min-jae up with typical teenage suspicion. Maya immediately loved him because he could talk about art for hours without getting bored. The ceremony was short. The vows were honest. When the officiant pronounced them married, Min-jae kissed Zara like she was the only person in the world, and in that moment, she was. At the reception, Zara found herself alone with Mrs. Choi for a moment. "Thank you," the older woman said quietly, "for saving my son. Not just his life, but his soul. I didn't do anything. You did everything. You showed him he could be different than his father. That love didn't have to be transactional. That he was worthy of being loved for himself." Mrs. Choi squeezed her hand. "I hired you to give him peace in death. You gave him reason to live instead." "I got lucky," Zara said. "That day in the diner, when you sat down, I was one bill away from losing everything. If you'd asked the next day, I might have said no. I don't believe in luck, dear. I believe in fate." Mrs. Choi smiled. "And I believe you and Min-jae were always meant to find each other. I just helped it along." They stood together, watching Min-jae laugh with Taehyun, both brothers relaxed and happy in a way they probably never had been before. "What happened to Uncle Kong?" Zara asked. "Federal custody. Charges for embezzlement, conspiracy, attempted murder." Mrs. Choi's voice was satisfied. "He'll be in prison for a very long time. Long enough that when he gets out, the world he knew will be completely gone." "And the business?" "Taehyun is taking over operations. He's better suited for it anyway, smarter, more strategic, less burdened by our father's legacy." She looked at Zara. "Min-jae is free to choose his own path now. Thanks to you." That night, after the last guests had left and the venue was quiet, Min-jae and Zara stood together under the stars. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That's 6 months ago. I was eating dinner alone, convinced my life was going nowhere." She leaned into him. "And then your mother made the craziest proposition I've ever heard. Best money she ever spent. She's going to hold this over us forever." "Absolutely." He turned her to face him. "But you know what? I don't care. Because she was right. We're perfect together. Even though we started with a lie? Especially because we started with a lie. It means we had to choose to make it real. We couldn't take the easy path. We had to fight for this." He kissed her softly. "And I do it all again. Every complicated, chaotic, beautiful moment." Zara touched the real engagement ring he'd given her, a simple band with a small sapphire, elegant and understated and perfect. But on her other hand, she wore the wire ring he'd made. She'd never take it off. "What now?" she asked. "Now we build our life. Together. No more pretending, no more secrets. Just us being honest and messy and real." Sounds perfect. They stood together, two people who'd found each other in the strangest way possible, and Zara realized something. Love didn't always start with a perfect meet-cute or a fairy tale beginning. Sometimes it started with $6,000 and a desperate mother's scheme. Sometimes it started with lies that slowly, beautifully, became the truest thing in your life. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it started with a stranger's hand in a hospital room and a whispered word, "Stay." That changed everything. "I love you, Mrs. Choi," Min-jae whispered. "I love you too," Zara whispered back. "Though professionally, I'm keeping Bennett. My business cards are already printed." He laughed, that full, genuine laugh she loved. "Fair enough. As long as you're mine in every way that matters. Always." They walked back to their car hand in hand, heading toward their honeymoon and their future, and a life built on choosing each other every single day. Behind them, the vineyard glowed in the starlight, witness to the love story that started with the craziest proposition and became the realest thing either of them had ever known. And somewhere in the universe, Fate and Mrs. Choi were definitely high-fiving. 1 year later, Zara sat in the same diner where it all began, bouncing 6-month-old baby Luna on her knee. Min-jae sat across from her, making ridiculous faces at their daughter to make her laugh. You know what's funny? Zara said.
What?
A year ago, I was sitting in this exact booth, thinking my life was going nowhere. And then your mother. Don't. Min-jae grinned. Don't give her any more ammunition. She already takes credit for literally everything good in our lives. She kinda deserves it though. I know. That's what makes it so annoying. As if summoned, Mrs. Choi swept into the diner, immediately making a beeline for their table. She scooped up Luna, cooing in Korean, pressing kisses to the baby's face. I was having lunch here last week, Mrs. Choi said, settling into the booth once she'd thoroughly loved on her granddaughter. And I saw the most interesting young woman. Professional, kind to the staff, eating alone. Ma, no, Min-jae said immediately. I haven't even told you what I was thinking. You're thinking of setting someone up. Absolutely not. You're not doing this again. But darling, Taehyun really needs. Taehyun can find his own dates. He's too focused on work. He needs someone to. Zara caught Min-jae's eye and bit back a laugh. Through the diner window, she could see Taehyun's car pulling up. And when he walked in, followed by a woman in a business suit who looked both confused and curious, Zara knew exactly what was happening. Here we go again, she murmured. Min-jae groaned. My family is a nightmare. I know. Zara reached across the table, took his hand. But there are nightmare. They watched as Mrs. Choi launched into her matchmaking spiel, as Taehyun caught sight of the woman and his expression shifted from resignation to interest as the whole ridiculous cycle began again. Should we warn her? Min-jae asked, nodding toward the woman. Warn her about what? That Mrs. Choi's crazy schemes actually work. Point taken. Zara leaned back, watching her mother-in-law work her magic, and smiled. A year ago, she'd been the confused woman in the business suit, listening to an impossible proposition from an elegant stranger. Now she was married to the love of her life, mother to a beautiful baby girl, running her own successful event planning business, and part of the most chaotic, loving family she'd ever known. Sometimes the craziest things turned out to be the best things. Sometimes $6,000 and a desperate mother's scheme changed your entire life. And sometimes, if you were very, very lucky, the strangest beginning led to the most beautiful story. Min-jae squeezed her hand, and Zara squeezed back, both of them thinking the same thing. They wouldn't change a single moment. Not even the ridiculous beginning. Especially not the ridiculous beginning. 6 months after that day in the diner, Zara received a letter. No return address, just elegant handwriting on expensive cream stationery. Inside was a single line. Thank you for saying yes to the impossible. Love always finds a way when you're brave enough to take the chance. SC. And tucked inside the envelope was a check for $50,000 with a note. For your business. You earned this by saving my son's life. Use it to build your dreams. Zara held the check with shaking hands, tears streaming down her face. She'd thought the money was the point that first day. Turned out, the money was just the universe's way of getting her to the right place at the right time to find the love of her life. She looked across their small apartment where Min-jae was playing with Luna, making their daughter giggle with ridiculous faces, his tiger tattoo visible as he moved, his laughter filling their home with joy. He caught her watching and smiled, that genuine, unguarded smile that still made her heart skip. What's that? He called. Your mother being terrifyingly thoughtful again.
He laughed.
Should I be worried? Always. But also grateful. She crossed to him, kissed him softly while Luna babbled between them. Your mother's crazy schemes have a pretty good track record. That they do. He pulled her down onto the couch beside him, Luna settling in her lap. Think she'll ever stop matchmaking? Not a chance. She's probably already plotting Taehyun's wedding as we speak. Poor Taehyun. or lucky Taehyun. Depends on how you look at it. They sat together, their daughter between them, in their small apartment that was nothing like the Choi mansion, but felt more like home than anywhere Zara had ever lived. Outside their window, the city hummed with life and possibility. And somewhere out there, Mrs. Choi was probably sitting across from another unsuspecting woman, making another impossible proposition that would change another life forever. Because sometimes love needed a little push. Sometimes it needed $6,000 and a desperate lie. Sometimes it needed a mother who refused to give up on her son's happiness. And sometimes, just sometimes, the craziest beginning led to the most perfect ending. Zara looked at Min-jae, at Luna, at the life they'd built from the most ridiculous start, and smiled. She wouldn't change a single thing. Not one moment. Not even the part where a stranger sat down at her table and offered her money to pretend to love a dying man. Because that pretend love became the realest thing she'd ever known. And that, in the end, was worth more than any amount of money in the world. Sometimes the best love stories start with the craziest proposals. Sometimes you just have to be brave enough to say yes to the impossible. And sometimes, when you least expect it, a stranger walks into your life and changes everything forever. What would you do if someone offered you money to pretend to be their son's wife? Would you take the risk? Would you walk away? Would you trust your gut even when it sounded absolutely insane? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you loved Zara and Min-jae's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more emotional romance stories that will make you believe in love again. Because remember, the craziest beginnings sometimes lead to the most beautiful endings. You just have to be brave enough to say yes. See you in the next story. And who knows? Maybe Mrs. Choi will be back with another scheme.